Hello everyone, I welcome you back to our channel. This is Legal Mindset at the Bar, and today we are very glad that we have brought back the person you liked most in our previous video about the Kabaka crisis 1953 to 1955, and now he has come back to elaborate more on Crawford's period that we talked about too much in our previous topic. So, Council, I beg that you introduce yourself.
Um, yes, thank you very much for another invitation at the Legal Mindset at the Bar. Yeah, I would call it maybe an expert invitation or whatever it is. Yeah, thank you very much, and we are here to talk about Crawford's period. Yes, that is all. My name is Kelly Martin. Yes.
Okay, thank you very much, Council, for honoring our invitation. And now today, we want to internalize, to go deep into the Crawford's period. So, I want you to tell our dear viewers who was Crawford, uh, what did Crawford come with, and entirely the background of Crawford.
Background of Crawford. Okay. For the introduction, Crawford was the British governor of Uganda from the period of 1957 to 1961. Now, Crawford, initially, before he came to Uganda, he was governor in the Seychelles Islands. Yes, he was governor in the Seychelles Islands, where he served from the period of 1951 to 1953. After that, he came to Kenya. Yes, Kenya, where he was deputy governor from the period of 1953 up to 1957. And from Kenya, just crossed over and came to Uganda.
Oh,
Yes.
so now our viewers are interested in Crawford, so I think they have known who Crawford was. And now I would like you to elaborate about the reforms of Crawford in Uganda and give us the major reason why Crawford came or why the British sent Crawford to the Republic.
Crawford, his name was Sir Frederick Crawford. Yes, that was his name. And he came to Uganda as a successor of Sir Andrew Benjamin Cohen.
Yes.
Yes. When Crawford came to Uganda, I must say he found very many scuffles here and there.
Yeah.
Yes, because of the tension that had developed.
The Kabaka crisis.
Yes, the Kabaka crisis and stuff. So now with Crawford coming to Uganda, I would say he was sent to Uganda partially because of his character. He was a very peaceful man.
Wow.
So basically, he only came to settle what was in dispute. So having come to settle what was in dispute, his core instruction was one, and that instruction was to implement reforms that would lead to legislative developments in Uganda. Yes.
So we saw that from your discussion, I have understood that Crawford succeeded Cohen.
Yes.
So Cohen had come to decolonize. So why did Crawford come?
Why did Crawford come? Yes, like I mentioned, by the time Cohen left, he had left very many scaffolds here and there. So it would be very difficult for the successor, who was Crawford at that time. And what he came to do was he realized that the actual problem that had caused the scuffles was political representation. Yes, it was because of that political representation that brought in the tension of the Kabaka crisis and the Namirembe Agreement of 1955 and all that.
So, can you give us an overview of Crawford's period?
An overview of
Yeah.
Crawford's period. Dear students,
Forgive me, Council, to interrupt your discussion.
yes.
Elaborate, tell us when did that period start? Because the viewers are there. So curious, when did his period start and when did it end?
When did it end? It started in Crawford's period, started in 1957. Remember, Cohen came, served from 1952 to 1957. So when Crawford came, he continued from there. To be specific, he came in February 1957. That is when he came, took over, served from that period up to 1961. Then eventually after 1961, another person took over who was Sir Walter Coates.
Wow.
Yes, Governor Sir Walter Coates, who the British colonial governor who led Uganda to independence.
Okay. So we were on the overview of Crawford's period, the characteristics of each period, the things what happened in each period, the conferences held in each period. Can you give us that overview?
That overview comprises of there are four. Yes, there are four main, let me call them meetings that you have to note. One is the Wild Committee. The second one is the Munster Commission. And the third one, the third and the fourth one are the two constitutional conferences in London, which was the Lancaster Conference of 1960, yes, of 1960, 60, of 1960, I forgot.
7.
Yes,
Yeah.
1960. Sorry, not 67. It was 1961.
Wow.
Yes, 1961. And as well as the Marlborough Conference that came later in 1962.
So Marlborough came in 1962.
Yes,
Lancaster came
came
in
in
1961.
1961. Yes.
So, can you elaborate more about those instances? The Marlborough, the Lancaster, the Munster, and the Wild Committee. So, start with the Wild Committee. Tell our viewers what was it about, why did it come?
For broader details, allow me to refer you to the book called the Constitutional History of Uganda, Political and Constitutional History of Uganda, by Justice George Wilson Kanyihamba. All those things are stated from page 42 up to 59. But to move on quick with what my colleague has been talking about, I'll start with the Wild Committee. And the Wild Committee, if I must say, the Wild Committee was called to address, yes, to address the scaffolds that Cohen had left behind. Which scaffolds am I talking about? I'm talking about the scaffolds of representation.
Yes.
Yes, representation. I must say that before these scaffolds came by, representation in Uganda had not been, I would say it had been underrated. Because briefly, if I may take you back to 1945, that is when we had the first three representatives, the first three African representatives on the Legislative Council. Now, those people were on the Legislative Council and they were Africans. But unfortunately, the majority of the persons in the protectorate that had to be represented widely instead had the least representation. So when Crawford came, he came to capture. Yes, he came to capture and develop those representation aspects in Uganda. So eventually, when that Wild Committee was called, I would say it was called the Wild Committee because it was chaired by J.B. Wild.
Wow.
Yes, J.B. Wild. So that is where the committee got its name from. But some of the characteristics of that committee of that committee, I would say. That committee, it was called in 1959. Yes, it was called in 1959. And the purpose of calling that committee, if I may make it straight, it would be for scramble and partition of Uganda. And what do I mean by scramble and partition of Uganda? That the aim of calling that committee was to discuss the form of government Uganda was to adopt, the size, mode of representation, and the number of seats in the Legislative Council. Yes, if I may move on from that, the reason as to why that committee was called for, the reason as to why it aimed at representation, just like I talked about the history of 1945 and all. From that time, African representation was minimal. And here, Uganda was advancing towards independence.
Yeah.
Yes, by 1958, yes, the representation of Africans on on the Legislative Council was 36. So, because Uganda was advancing towards independence, there was a need to have these Africans brought into the system so that they can learn how to handle politics on their own.
Yeah, because the British were departing
Yes,
sooner.
the British were departing soon.
Yeah.
So from that time, the World Committee passed a resolution. Yes, it passed a resolution, as I said, that it was called in 1959. Now, from that time, it passed a resolution that there was supposed to be direct elections in Uganda. Yes, those direct elections, Buganda specifically did not buy that idea of having the direct elections.
Yeah.
Reason being, previously in the 1955 Buganda Agreement, there was there was um, there was a clause that Buganda was supposed to provide, was supposed to send in to send to the legico its nominees who were supposed to be indirectly elected. Unfortunately, yes, that Namirembe agreement, there was also a clause in that agreement which provided that those reforms were supposed to go for a period of not less than, yes, of not less than 6 years. Now, unfortunately, remember this period was 1959, and these resolutions of those resolutions of the agreement were in 1955, and Crawford having come in 1957. You know, now that you are looking at the year 1958,
Yeah.
the the Baganda felt cheated that how come the agreement we signed was saying that this is supposed to go up to 6 years and on and so forth. But now that you have come, that is hardly like 4 years, right?
Yeah.
Yes, about 4 years. And the Baganda felt cheated. And from that, they boycotted those elections, the 1958 elections, because those 1958 elections were passed. They were passed as a form. It was majorly to test. They were passed in 1958, but eventually voting took place in 1959, and the purpose was to test, just to test the mode of, mode of uh, mode of elections and governance.
Okay. So we have had the Wild Committee.
Yes.
What I've understood in it is that Crawford introduced a lot of reforms in it, where he wanted to specify the mode of participation, the mode of governance, and I would like to continue to the monster, the monster.
The Monster Commission.
The Monster Commission. So what is under the Monster Commission? What should students know about the Monster Commission? What shouldn't they leave when they are answering their papers about the Monster Commission?
So about the Monster Commission was called in 1961. Yes, it was called in 1961, and the purpose of calling the Munster Commission was to discuss the future, to discuss and debate the future politics of Uganda. Why? Because from that time, from the time that having had the 58 elections, the 50, like I've said, the 58 elections were a test. They were a test, and the reason as and why Uganda boycotted and all, I've explained that before. Now coming on to the 1961, the Munster Commission, its aim, like I've said, it was about
The Munster Commission came in 1961.
one. Yes, it came in 1961, and its aim was to prepare Ugandans for future governance. Future governance, yeah, at that point, there was an election. It recommended for an election that would occur in 1961 to prepare Uganda for independence.
Yeah.
Yes.
Because it was only 1 year to independence.
Yes, it was only 1 year to independence.
Yes.
And at that time of 1961, yes, of course, it was called the Munster Commission because it was chaired by the Earl of Munster. That is why it was named the Munster Commission. Now, the recommendation passed in that Munster Commission, it was to settle all disputes that were around before independence. So by having to settle those scuffles led to the promulgation of the constitution,
Yeah.
which we later had as the 1962 constitution. So that Munster Commission had it was liaising with political activists and certain political parties to debate and discuss on the sample, on the kind of constitution Uganda would adopt. Yes, and at that time, the Munster Commission passed a recommendation that Buganda was to become a federal state. And yes, it would become a federal state, but within Uganda.
Yeah.
So from that period, many of us, if you've been keeping yourself active with what is happening in Uganda, you oftentimes hear the Katikiro talking about Ensonga Semasonga Town. Now, Ensonga Semasonga Town, one of those Semasongas is the issue of federal.
Yeah.
And the issue of federal started from this Munster Commission that we are discussing now. So at that time, Buganda was granted a federal state. What I mean by a federal state is that Buganda was allowed to handle, the best word I would say would be self-sustainable. Yes, Buganda was allowed to be
internal autonomy to handle its own affairs.
Yes, to handle its own affairs. And yes, from that time, that was the resolution passed in the Munster Commission.
So what I've learned from that is that the Baganda had earlier alone yearned before such pride.
Yes.
So the Munster Commission gave it to them. And another thing is that the Munster Commission came to prepare for the future.
Yes.
And another thing is that it laid the ground for the 1962 constitution and the federal state of Buganda. And so now, you talked about the two conferences held in London. That is Lancaster of 1961 and Marlborough of 1962. So briefly tell our viewers what came out of the conference of Lancaster 1961.
What came out of the conference of 1961, as just like you've mentioned, that Uganda had yearned for that pride, to be sovereign. Now, from that point of being sovereign, if I may draw you back to 1961, the elections of 1961, DP won those elections.
Yeah.
Yes, but they won those elections, but DP having been led by Benedicto Chiwanuka, the Baganda did not welcome that. Why? Because Benedicto Chiwanuka went against the will of the Baganda, that he chose to participate in those elections, yet Buganda itself had refused, had boycotted those elections.
The Baganda started seeing him as an hypocrite.
Yes, as a hypocrite and all.
And Buganda against the Baganda.
Yes.
Yes.
So from that time, the relationship between Buganda and the political sector became bitter.
Am I true if I say that Benedicto Chiwanuka's bitterness with the Baganda created ground for Kabaka Mutesa II's what should I call it? Kabaka Mutesa II's good friendship with Milton Obote.
Yes.
I see that Milton Obote used that as a weapon to defend Mutesa II.
Yes.
Yeah.
So as a result of that weapon, that I would say at the 1961 Lancaster Conference that you've been asking about, we see the establishment of the marriage of political convenience.
Yeah.
And at that marriage of political convenience, it came as a result that political parties were supposed to discuss the form of the type of constitution that Uganda was to have later on. Now, that would not have been an issue, but the reason as to why it became an issue, Benedicto Chiwanuka himself was arguing that no, I cannot be in office for only 1 year. That is very unfair.
Yeah.
So it being unfair, he was to the effect that I need some more time. Like the reforms you're bringing now should last a bit longer. But at the Lancaster Conference, that was not accepted, and I would say the delegates of DP boycotted and moved out. That Lancaster Conference happened in London.
Yeah.
Yes, it happened in London. So at that point, there was disagreement. The two minds didn't meet. Now, since Obote had his own ambitions, political ambitions, yes, and also the Kabaka having seen that at this time my interests have been valued.
Kabaka wanted power.
Yes.
Obote wanted political representation.
Yes. So they chose to come together and establish the marriage of political convenience, which later on continued on as Uganda got independence up to 1966 when it collapsed.
Yeah, that's why we even saw that Kabaka Mutesa II was the first president, and Milton Obote being his first prime minister.
It was from that conference.
So let us now talk about the Marlborough Conference of 1962.
The Marlborough Conference of 1962, its main aim was to address problems that had been left behind by the Lancaster Conference. Now, at the Marlborough Conference of 1962, it operated on the recommendations passed by the Mulson Commission. The Mulson Commission, of course, was chaired by Lord Mulson, and its views were that the biggest issue that had not been settled in Uganda by independence was the issue of the two lost counties.
Very good.
Yes, the two lost counties, that is to say Buyaga and Buganga.
Because earlier in Lancaster, they failed to reach a consensus. Now we are here in Marlborough, they are trying.
Yes. Yeah. Now in Marlborough, the Mulson Commission, in its view, passed a recommendation that the two lost counties should be dropped back to Bunyoro. But Buganda, remember those counties were under Buganda, although they were originally from Bunyoro.
They were as a gift of the 1900 Buganda agreement.
Now the Baganda did not buy that idea, and they refused. Now eventually, at the Marlborough Conference, it came to be seen that the Buganda and Bunyoro did not come to a consensus to that effect. Now, what they decided, what the Marlborough Conference decided, was that let both of us lose it. Losing it, I mean, the two counties were given to the central government.
Wow.
And in a recommendation at that conference, it was passed that they were to be given to the central government, like supervised by the central government. But later on, after 2 years, a referendum would be held for the inhabitants of Buyaga and Bugangaizi to decide whether they should go back to Bunyoro or come back to Buganda or remain under the central government.
So the people had to choose.
Yes, the people had
And
to choose.
interesting on that, those two counties later on spoiled the relationship between the president and
Yes.
the prime minister, Milton Obote
And the Kabaka.
Kabaka Mutesa too, because the Kabaka never wanted that referendum to happen.
Yes, exactly.
But Milton Obote wanted the referendum to happen. So, summarize it in only 1 minute, Council. Crawford, this period, tell us it started from here, it came from here, only 1 minute.
I would say Crawford came to fulfill Article 6. Yes, Article 6 and 7 of the 1920 Order in Council, which was to the effect that there had to be a legislative council established. So the legislative council was there by 1945, but it was a little malfunctional because it did not represent the majority of the people in Uganda. So when Crawford came, he came with reforms strictly for legislation. And upon that, that is why we see the elections being held consecutively up to independence until Crawford left in 1961.
So we also saw the conferences, the Munster Commission.
Yes, the Munster Commission, all those commissions and conferences were called to settle disputes in Uganda so that legislation in Uganda would move smoothly, because it would be useless for you to draft a law and yet the people you're drafting it for are disentangled.
Yeah.
Yes.
So is it true when I say that Crawford was such a peaceful man that he came to Uganda to restore peace?
Yes, to restore peace and enact laws.
And to enact laws. So, because this period was characterized by a number of conferences,
yes,
commissions, and committees. So, thank you very much, Council. This information is really very helpful, and for sure, you should refer students the sources you use to get your information. Maybe they can inbox us on our numbers. We shall refer them to those textbooks.
Hopefully they do.
So this is Legal Mindset at the bar. We have been with Council Kelly Martin. Thank you very much. Subscribe, like, and share with your colleagues.